Welcome to Tech News Briefing. It's Monday, October 9th. I'm Zoe Thomas for the Wall Street Journal. While some jobs may be swept away by generative AI tools, new ones could show up in their place. Here to talk about some of the new careers that AI could and already is creating is WSJ Pro Enterprise Technology Bureau Chief Stephen Rosenbusch. So Stephen, you and your colleagues wrote about some of these new jobs, and I just want to start with one that seems essential to getting AI models up and running at companies. What does an in-house large language model developer do?
These large language models, which are trained on massive amounts of data scraped from the internet to recognize, generate, and predict language and sequences, actually need to be tailored and custom fit to purpose. So in finance, for example, we're likely to see developers who take these large language models and customize them for certain financial applications. You could see that same dynamic taking shape across all sorts of industries.
All right, so once this tech is integrated into companies, a lot of people are going to need to be, reshuffled. And you say there's going to be a job called a ResKiller?
Exactly. We're evolving, we hope, but at not the same sort of speed that machines are. We proceed at the pace of evolution, much, much slower. So we're going to have to work really, really hard in some ways to keep up with machines and keep our skills relevant, figure out what it is that we can do really well relative to wherever the machines are at the moment, and then figure out what skills are really useful in certain settings, whether they're companies or other environments. And those people are going to be the ResKillers.
Have we seen this job already existing because of the technology that we have today?
Of course, but what's new here is that there's this new dynamic between machines, and specifically AI, and what people need to know. So these people are going to have very specific understanding of where AI is in terms of its development, of where people ought to be in terms of their development, and how to apply them to really specific situations.
Okay, this next job is something that we've actually talked about on the show before, and it seems like maybe something that's created really just because of the advent of AI. Tell us about prompt engineers.
Well, this is a job that everyone's talking about right now, and no one had anything to say about this role until ChatGPT made its debut last November. But now you need someone who actually understands how to talk to the machines. While the machines understand, in a sense, natural language, you sort of have to know what to say to them, and that's not so obvious. And right now, we're all used to dealing with search, but what you're getting there is a very static, straightforward answer to a straightforward question. Where is the restaurant? Where am I going? This is a new skill in which you end up with one set of responses and then refine it. And over time, the AI gets smarter, gives you better answers, and hopefully we get more value out of it as well.
The last job I want to ask you about may seem like, the most out there, but it really has a useful goal. AI psychotherapist. Why do we need those?
Well, who doesn't really need a psychotherapist?
Sure.
The problem with AI as it exists now is that unlike the software programs that we've developed over the last number of decades, they don't have an audit trail for us. They don't really explain themselves. It's not obvious how or why a large language model with 1 trillion parameters spits out the answer that it does. There are just too many variables. So we're going to need people who are trained in sort of understanding the patterns and going back and reverse engineering the decisions that AI has made. If I go to an AI and I ask it for a recipe to make from the things in my basket, it's not a life and death matter, at least most of the time. But, if you're talking about hiring someone, if you're talking about issuing a mortgage, if you're talking about something that could involve some important life event, you really want to know why the AI is making a recommendation that affects someone's life. Just as we need to have an explanation when people make these decisions, we're still going to have an explanation when the machines make decisions.
All right, that's Stephen Rosenbush, Bureau Chief for the WSJ's Enterprise Technology Team. Thanks for joining us.
Thank you.
And that's it for Tech News Briefing. Today's show was produced by me and Anthony Bancy with Deputy Editor Chris Sinsley. I'm Zoe Thomas for the Wall Street Journal. We'll be back tomorrow. Thanks for listening.